On June 14th, 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France, faced complete defeat at the Battle of Marengo when 30,000 Austrian troops surprised his scattered forces. By mid-afternoon, his army was in full retreat and victory seemed impossible. But within hours, one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals would cement Napoleon's legend and change the fate of Europe. Here's what it was really like to experience Napoleon's greatest comeback. Before we start, if these stories help you sleep, hitting subscribe would be amazing. And I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop your location and time in the comments. Sometimes I see someone from Tokyo commenting at what's like 3 a.m. my time. Okay, tonight we're heading back to the Napoleonic Wars. But before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second, adjust your pillows, fix that blanket. Where we're going, you're definitely going to want to be settled in. Your eyes flutter open to a damp grey dawn in northern Italy. The first thing that hits you is the soreness. Every muscle in your body aches like you've been trampled by horses. You're not in your cozy bed with its memory foam and clean sheets. No, you're sprawled on hard-packed earth with only a thin, scratchy wool blanket between you and the ground. The June morning should be warm, but there's a chill that seeps right into your bones from the rain-soaked soil beneath you. Around you, thousands of French soldiers are stirring in the pre-dawn light. The smell is, let's just say, an army of men who haven't bathed in weeks creates its own special aroma. Sweat, leather, gunpowder, and something else, that underlying tension that comes before battle. Up. Get up. Citizen. The Austrians are moving. The shout jolts you fully awake. The year is 1800, and you're a soldier in Napoleon Bonaparte's army of reserve. And this day, June 14th, will become one of the most legendary in military history, though right now it just feels like another miserable morning in a foreign country where people keep trying to kill you. You scramble to your feet, grabbing your musket. Your stomach growls painfully. Dinner last night was a half ration of mouldy bread that you had to choke down with some questionable water. The supply wagons are somewhere far behind the army, and foraging parties haven't brought back much. Napoleon's bold strategy of crossing the Alps has gotten you behind enemy lines, but it's also gotten you pretty damn hungry. "They're saying the Austrians are attacking from Alessandria," mutters the soldier next to you, a grizzled veteran named Marcel with a magnificent moustache and a missing front tooth. But that can't be right. The first consul said they'd be retreating. That's the thing about Napoleon Bonaparte. He's a military genius, sure, but even geniuses make mistakes, and this morning he's made a big one. See, Napoleon's convinced that the Austrian army under General Michael von Melas is trying to escape east, so he spread his forces out across miles of countryside to catch them. You and about 15,000 other French troops are around the village of Marengo, while another 10,000 are scattered elsewhere. It's a smart plan if the enemy is actually retreating, but they're not. As the morning fog lifts, an unmistakable sound rolls across the plains like distant thunder, cannon fire, a lot of it. "Holy shit," Marcel whispers, his face going pale beneath his weathered tan. "That's a full attack. Within minutes, officers are shouting orders, drummers are beating assembly, and your regiment is forming up. Through gaps in the morning mist, you catch glimpses of the Austrian army emerging from Alessandria, not retreating at all, but advancing in full force, 30,000 men with over 100 cannons against your scattered 15,000 with barely a dozen guns. Wait, this can't be right. Napoleon is supposed to be the one surprising enemies, not the other way around. But here you are. The first consul was wrong, someone says nearby. We're completely outnumbered, and just like that, you're marching forward into what might be the last day of your life. See, Napoleon Bonaparte's not actually with you. That's another problem. He's miles away at his headquarters, convinced the Austrians are retreating, not attacking. By the time messengers reach him with news of the assault, precious hours will be lost. The initial Austrian attack hits like a hammer. Their artillery opens up and the sound is deafening, not just the boom of the cannons, but the whistling shriek of round shot tearing through the air, followed by the sickening thud when it finds its target. You watch in horror as a cannonball rips through your formation, taking 3 men with it in a spray of red. Your regiment forms up along a small stream called the Fontenone. It's not much of a defensive position, just a narrow waterway with steep banks, but it's all you've got. The orders are simple. Hold this line at all costs. The Austrians come in waves, their white uniforms standing out against the green fields. Their first assault hits the French centre, where General Victor's division is positioned. Your own regiment is part of General Lanz's division, off to the right flank. "Oh, steady," your captain shouts. "Wait for the order." The first Austrian attack is repulsed. Men cheer around you. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. But then you look west and your heart sinks. More Austrian columns are forming up. A lot more. "I've been in 12 battles," Marcel says, calmly reloading his musket, "and I've never seen odds this bad." "Then why are you so calm?" you ask, your own hands shaking as you try to reload. He shrugs. "If today's my day, it's my day. Besides, I've seen the little corporal pull off miracles before." The little corporal, that's what veterans like Marcel call Napoleon, a nickname from his early days as a young artillery officer. But right now, the little corporal is nowhere to be seen and his soldiers are in serious trouble. The second Austrian attack is stronger than the first. They've brought up more artillery, and the French line along the Fontenone is being pounded mercilessly. The air fills with smoke so thick you can barely see 20 paces ahead. The roar of gunfire becomes continuous, not individual shots, but a rolling thunder of muskets and cannon. Time loses meaning in battle. Minutes stretch like hours. Hours compress into moments. The fighting along the Fontenone continues throughout the morning, attack after attack. The stream's water runs red in places. The bodies pile up on both banks. By noon, the situation is dire. The Austrians have found a gap north of your position and are threatening to outflank the entire French line. General Victor's division in the centre is running dangerously low on ammunition. Some units have completely run out, reduced to using their muskets as clubs or throwing stones. Then the worst happens. The Austrian weight of numbers finally tells. Their 30,000 men and 100 guns against the French, 16,000 men and 15 guns is simply too much. First one French regiment breaks, then another. The retreat begins, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. Your captain shouts for an orderly withdrawal, but there's nothing orderly about what follows. The French line collapses, and suddenly you're running eastward across those same fields you defended all morning. Austrian cavalry appears, charging into the retreating French infantry. Men who stop to make a stand are cut down. "Stay together," Marcel shouts over the chaos. "If we scatter, we're dead." Your regiment manages to maintain some cohesion as it falls back, fighting a desperate rearguard action. But all around you, the French army is disintegrating. By 3 in the afternoon, the battle seems utterly lost. The French have been driven back almost a mile from their original positions, leaving behind their dead, their wounded, and most of their artillery. This is what defeat looks like. Complete catastrophic defeat. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a messenger finally reaches Napoleon Bonaparte with the news that his army is fighting for its life. The story goes that when Napoleon heard the distant sound of cannon fire that morning, he dismissed it. Just a reconnaissance in force. he supposedly said. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France and arguably the greatest military mind of his generation, could make a colossal misjudgment. By the time he realizes his error and races toward the battlefield, the situation appears hopeless. The French army that had marched triumphantly over the Alps is now streaming eastward in retreat, pursued by victorious Austrians. You're exhausted, parched and terrified as you stumble across the plains east of Marengo. Your unit has been reduced to perhaps half its original strength. Marcel is still with you, blood streaming from a minor wound on his forehead but otherwise intact. "This is it," someone nearby says. "The campaign is over. We'll be lucky to make it back to France alive." The retreat continues throughout the early afternoon. The Austrian pursuit, thankfully, isn't particularly aggressive. General Melas, the 70-year-old Austrian commander, believes he's won a decisive victory. So confident is he in his triumph that he returns to Alessandria to write his victory dispatch, leaving his chief of staff, General Zach, to handle the pursuit. It's a decision that will go down as one of the worst in military history. Around 5 o'clock, as your shattered regiment reaches the village of San Giuliano, something unexpected happens. Fresh troops appear on the road, French troops, marching westward toward the sound of battle, not away from it. "Who are they?" you ask, staring in disbelief. Marcel squints, then breaks into a gap-toothed grin. "That's Desai's division. They've come back." General Louis Desai had been detached from the main army with his division of 5,000 men to block what Napoleon thought would be the Austrian escape route. When Desai heard the distant sound of battle, he turned his division around and marched to the sound of the guns, a soldier's most sacred duty. Now, as the sun begins its westward descent, Desai's fresh troops are arriving on the battlefield, and with them is Napoleon himself, rallying the retreating soldiers. "I've gone far enough for today," Napoleon announces to his men. "It is my habit to sleep on the field of battle. The effect on morale is electric. Retreating soldiers stop in their tracks. Scattered units reform. Napoleon, the master psychologist as well as the master strategist, knows exactly what his demoralized army needs to hear." Wait, am I making this up? Did he actually say that? Look, Napoleon was basically a walking quote machine. Half the things attributed to him were probably made up later, but it makes for a damn good story, right? Desai reportedly tells Napoleon, "This battle is completely lost." But it's only 3 o'clock. There is still time to win another. And that's exactly what they set out to do. Napoleon quickly develops a new plan. While the remnants of his battered army reform their lines, Desai's fresh division will prepare a counterattack. General Marmont gathers all available artillery, just 18 guns, and positions them to blast the advancing Austrians. Meanwhile, General Kellerman's heavy cavalry, which has remained relatively intact, is held in reserve for the decisive moment. The Austrians, believing they're simply mopping up a defeated enemy, advance in a long column along the main road, their guard down. It's General Zach leading the Austrian advance guard of Grenadiers elite troops, but moving forward with the casual confidence of men who think the fighting is over. They have no idea what's about to hit them. At about 5:30, Desai's division strikes. The 9th Light Regiment leads the attack, pouring heavy fire into the surprised Austrians. For a moment, the Austrians waver, but then begin to form up to meet this unexpected threat. It's at this critical moment that tragedy strikes. General Desai, leading from the front as always, is shot through the heart and dies instantly. His last words, according to legend, tell the first consul that I die regretting that I have not done enough to live in posterity. Again, with the suspiciously perfect last words. I mean, who knows if he actually said that? The guy just got shot through the heart, not exactly prime time for eloquent speeches, but it's one of those stories that's too good to not tell. The death of their commander could have broken the French attack. Instead, it galvanizes Desailles' men. Avenge our general becomes their battle cry as they surge forward with renewed fury. And then comes the masterstroke. As the Austrians struggle to deploy from column into line to meet Desailles' infantry attack, Napoleon gives the signal. General Kellerman's 400 heavy cavalrymen mounted on massive horses and armed with long straight swords charge directly into the Austrian flank. The impact is devastating. The Austrian grenadiers, caught in an awkward formation and hit from an unexpected direction, crumble under the cavalry charge. Within minutes, what had been a victorious Austrian army disintegrates into panic. Over 2,000 surrender on the spot, including General Zach himself. The French counterattack spreads across the battlefield like wildfire. Units that had been retreating in defeat just hours earlier are now charging forward, driving the stunned Austrians back toward Marengo and the Bormida River. By nightfall, the battlefield that had witnessed a decisive Austrian victory at 3 o'clock has, by some military miracle, transformed into a decisive French victory by 7. The Austrians retreat in disorder across the Bormida, leaving behind thousands of dead, wounded, and captured. You and Marcel, who hours earlier had been certain you were facing defeat and possibly death, now find yourselves standing victorious on the same ground you'd been forced to abandon. The cost has been terrible, nearly 6,000 French casualties, but the Austrians have lost even more heavily, with 8,000 killed, wounded, or captured. As darkness falls, Napoleon Bonaparte stands triumphant on the battlefield of Marengo. This victory, snatched from the jaws of defeat, will cement his position as first consul of France and pave the way for his eventual coronation as emperor. And as for you and Marcel, you're alive, which is more than can be said for many of your comrades. You're exhausted, hungry, and blood-spattered, but alive. The next morning, the Austrian commander, General Melas, the man who'd been so confident of victory that he'd returned to Alessandria to write his triumphant dispatch, sends negotiators to Napoleon. The armistice he signs will give France control of northern Italy and cement Napoleon's reputation as a military genius. What no one mentions, of course, is how close it had been, how near to total disaster. In later years, Napoleon would rewrite the history of Marengo, downplaying his initial mistake and the role of men like Desailles and Kellerman in salvaging victory. The official narrative would become one of strategic brilliance rather than a desperate comeback. But those who were there, men like you and Marcel, would know the truth, that Marengo wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle. That evening, legend has it that Napoleon, hungry after his near-defeat turned stunning victory, asked his chef to prepare him a meal. The chef, finding little in the way of provisions, cobbled together a dish using a scrawny chicken, tomatoes, garlic, and other ingredients foraged from nearby farms. This improvised dish would become known as chicken Marengo, supposedly one of Napoleon's favourites thereafter. Like many good stories, it's probably not entirely true. Napoleon's chef at the time, a man named Dunand, wasn't even with him at Marengo, and tomatoes weren't common in northern Italian cuisine of the period. But again, why let facts get in the way of a good story? As you sit by a campfire that night, sharing a meagre meal with Marcel and the other survivors, the magnitude of what you've just lived through begins to sink in. You've witnessed one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals, a defeat transformed into victory through a combination of leadership, courage, and simple luck. The little corporal pulled it off again, Marcel says, gnawing on a piece of bread. Don't know how he does it. But you were there. You saw how close it came to disaster, and you can't help but wonder how many more miracles can one man's luck provide? How many more times can defeat be turned to victory? For now, though, you're simply grateful to be alive as you stretch out on the hard ground, your body aching from the day's exertions. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the army settling down for the night surround you, so different from the peaceful quiet of your bedroom back home. Unlike your comfortable modern bed with its soft pillows and warm blankets, tonight you'll sleep on Italian soil beneath the stars with only a thin blanket between you and the earth. But you'll sleep as victors, not as defeated men, and sometimes that makes all the difference. The morning after Marengo is strangely quiet. Dawn breaks over a landscape transformed by violence. Yesterday, these fields outside Alessandria were green with summer crops. Now they're churned to mud and stained dark with blood. The air carries the metallic tang of gunpowder mixed with something worse, the beginning of decay, as thousands of bodies lie where they fell. You're one of the lucky ones. You survived. Your regiment took heavy casualties, almost 40%, but you and your friend Marcel made it through with nothing worse than exhaustion and a few scrapes. As you pick your way through the battlefield, helping to collect the wounded, the reality of yesterday's miracle victory sinks in. The French soldiers around you move with the hollow-eyed 1,000-yard stare that comes after cheating death. Nobody's celebrating. There's too much work to do, too many friends to bury. This is the part they never tell you about in the recruiting speeches, Marcel mutters, helping you carry a wounded man to the field hospital, really just a collection of tents where overworked surgeons labour non-stop, their aprons so soaked with blood they look like butchers. The day after glory. The wounded man between you whimpers as you jolt over uneven ground. He can't be more than 16, a drummer boy caught by Austrian grape shot. His left leg is a mangled mess below the knee. He'll lose the leg, Marcel says quietly, making sure the boy can't hear. If he's lucky, that's all he'll lose. Death doesn't always come quickly on the battlefield. Sometimes it lingers for days as infection sets in. You've seen it before, the slow spread of putrefaction, the fever, the delirium, men begging for water, then begging for death. You reach the hospital tents and surrender your burden to a harried medical orderly. The smell inside is overwhelming: blood, urine, feces, and the sickly sweet odour of gangrene. The sound is worse: moans, screams, and the terrible wet sounds of surgery performed without anaesthesia. "Come on," Marcel says, pulling you away. "Nothing more we can do here." As you walk back toward your regiment's position, you pass a different kind of tent, larger, with guards posted outside. The Emperor's tent. Not that he's Emperor yet. In 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte is still just the first consul of France, technically one of 3 men sharing power. But everyone knows who's really in charge. They say he slept on the battlefield last night, Marcel tells you, just like he promised. You believe that? You ask. Marcel snorts. Maybe, maybe not, but the men believe it, and that's what matters. That's Napoleon's genius. He knows exactly what his soldiers need to hear, what stories will fire their imagination and loyalty. Whether he actually slept on the hard ground or retired to a comfortable bed in a requisitioned villa doesn't matter. The legend is what counts. And speaking of legends, as you pass the command tent, the flap opens and out steps the man himself. It's your first close look at Napoleon Bonaparte, and he's smaller than you expected, not the tiny figure of later British propaganda, but certainly not imposing, maybe 5'6", with a pale complexion and dark hair cut short in the Roman style. But his eyes, there's something in those grey-blue eyes that makes you straighten automatically, like a schoolboy caught slouching. He's surrounded by a cluster of officers in brilliant uniforms, a stark contrast to his own simple green coat of a colonel of the Chasseurs à Cheval, his favourite regiment of the Consular Guard. While his generals gleam with gold braid and decorations, Napoleon's only ornament is a small tricolour cockade on his plain bicorn hat. He pauses, surveying the battlefield with those penetrating eyes. Then he notices you and Marcel, two common soldiers frozen in mid-step. "From which regiment?" he asks directly, his voice higher than you'd imagined, his accent still carrying traces of his Corsican origins. Marcel snaps to attention. "The 9th Light, Citizen First Consul, Lanz's division. The 9th? You fought well yesterday." Napoleon's gaze moves between you. "Were you present for the final attack?" "Yes, Citizen First Consul," Marcel answers. "We were retreating with the rest when General Desai arrived. We turned and fought." A shadow crosses Napoleon's face at the mention of Desai. A great man. France has lost one of her finest sons. There's genuine emotion in his voice. You've heard that Napoleon and Desai were close friends, comrades from the Egyptian campaign of 1798. Now Desai lies dead, another body cooling on the field of Marengo. "How is the morale in your unit?" Napoleon asks, shifting topics abruptly. Marcel hesitates, and you can see him debating whether to speak the unvarnished truth or a comforting lie. He opts for somewhere in between. The men are tired, Citizen First Consul, and hungry, but proud of yesterday's victory. Napoleon nods, as if this confirms what he already knows. The supply wagons will arrive today. Meanwhile, there will be distributions of captured Austrian provisions. His gaze moves to you. "And you, soldier? Your thoughts?" The question catches you off guard. You're nobody, just one common soldier among thousands. Yet here's Napoleon Bonaparte asking your opinion as if it matters. I think the men would fight better on full stomachs, Citizen First Consul," you manage, immediately regretting your boldness. But Napoleon's mouth quirks in what might be the ghost of a smile. "Indeed, an army marches on its stomach, as I am constantly reminding my quartermasters." He turns to one of his aides. "General Berthier, see to it that food distributions begin immediately, using the Austrian supplies if necessary." "Yes, Citizen First Consul," the aide responds. With a curt nod to you and Marcel, Napoleon continues on his inspection, trailed by his entourage of glittering officers. "Holy shit," you breathe once he's out of earshot. "Did that just happen?" Marcel looks equally stunned. "I think we just became part of the legend, and that's how legends grow, one small interaction at a time, spreading through an army of thousands." By nightfall, the story of Napoleon personally ordering food distributions after speaking with common soldiers will have travelled through the entire camp, growing more impressive with each retelling. The reality of those food distributions is somewhat less impressive. Your dinner that evening consists of captured Austrian hardtack rock-hard biscuits designed to last for months without spoiling, softened in brackish water, along with a small portion of salted pork and a ladleful of thin soup. Luxury compared to yesterday's near starvation, but hardly a feast. Still, with full bellies for the first time in days, the mood in the camp improves noticeably. Men who yesterday were too exhausted to do more than collapse into sleep now sit around campfires, talking and even laughing. The horror of battle begins to fade, replaced by the peculiar camaraderie that exists only among those who have faced death together and survived. "You know what's funny?" Marcel says, chewing thoughtfully on his softened hardtack. "I've been in the army 7 years, fought in maybe 20 battles, and I can't remember most of them. They all blur together after a while, but I'll remember Marengo till the day I die." "Because we almost lost?" you ask. He shakes his head, because we shouldn't have won. Days like yesterday, they're what separate the truly great generals from the merely good ones. Any officer can win when everything goes according to plan, but to snatch victory from certain defeat, that takes something special. Around your campfire, other soldiers nod in agreement. Despite his mistakes earlier in the day, spreading the army too thin, misreading Austrian intentions, Napoleon had managed to turn catastrophe into triumph in the space of a few hours. If that isn't military genius, what is? As night falls, you find yourself assigned to sentry duty along with Marcel and 2 other men from your company. Your post is near the edge of the camp with a clear view of the darkened battlefield where Austrian torches flicker as they continue collecting their dead and wounded. "Think they'll try again tomorrow?" one of the other sentries asks nervously, a young recruit on his first campaign. Marcel shakes his head. "Not a chance. Their army's broken. Melas will be lucky if he can get his remaining forces across the Po River intact." "So what happens now?" you ask. Marcel shrugs. "The Austrians sue for peace. We get to go home heroes. Bonaparte becomes a little more powerful, and then we wait for the next war to start." "You're a cynical bastard," the 4th sentry laughs. 7 years in Bonaparte's armies will do that to you, Marcel replies, but there's no bitterness in his voice. Despite his cynicism, you know he admires Napoleon. They all do, these veterans who followed him from victory to victory across Italy, Egypt, and now back to Italy again. The night passes slowly. You fight to stay awake, pinching yourself and pacing to keep from nodding off. Falling asleep on sentry duty is punishable by death, though in practice, first offences are usually handled with a brutal flogging instead. Neither option appeals to you. Around midnight, you notice movement on the darkened plain. Tensing, you raise your musket, peering into the gloom, but it's not an Austrian patrol, it's a woman moving among the bodies with a lantern. "What the hell?" the young recruit whispers. "Who is that?" "Camp follower," Marcel says grimly, "robbing the dead." In every army, there are women who follow the troops' wives, lovers, laundresses, cooks, and yes, scavengers who strip the battlefield of valuables after the fighting ends. It's a grim business, but a profitable one. "Shouldn't we stop her?" you ask. Marcel shrugs. "Why? The dead have no use for coins or rings, and she's probably got children to feed." It's another harsh reality of war that the romantic paintings and heroic poems never mention the desperate ecosystem that springs up around armies. For every soldier in Napoleon's forces, there's at least one civilian whose livelihood depends on the military machine. Sutlers selling food and drink, women washing clothes and tending the sick, craftsmen repairing equipment, and less savoury characters providing gambling, prostitution, and other vices. Dawn arrives with a thin drizzle that turns the churned earth to mud. Your sentry duty over, you trudge back to your regiment's position, looking forward to a few hours of sleep before whatever tasks the day brings. But as you approach the camp, you notice unusual activity, officers shouting orders, men forming into columns, supply wagons being loaded. "What's happening?" you ask a passing sergeant. "We're moving out," he answers. "First consul's orders. The whole army's heading east." "East? But the Austrians retreated west." The sergeant gives you a look that suggests he's questioning your intelligence. "We're not chasing them, you idiot. We're going to Milan. Word is Bonaparte's negotiating an armistice, but he wants to do it from a position of strength. That means securing northern Italy." This is classic Napoleon never resting, always pushing forward, using momentum to multiply the impact of victory. While other generals might have paused to rest their troops after a battle like Marengo, Bonaparte is already thinking 3 moves ahead, positioning his forces to maximize political leverage. Within hours, the entire French army is on the move, leaving behind burial details to inter the dead of both sides. The rain continues, turning the roads to muddy tracks that suck at your boots with every step. The march is miserable cold, wet, exhausting, but at least you're alive to suffer through it, which is more than can be said for the thousands left behind in the fields of Marengo. Marcel walks beside you, somehow maintaining his usual stoic expression despite the discomfort. "You know what's strange?" he says after several miles of silent trudging. "This campaign's lasted barely a month, but it feels like a year." He's right. It's hard to believe that just weeks ago you were part of the army of reserve assembling at Dijon in eastern France. From there, you'd marched to Geneva, then undertaken the grueling crossing of the Alps via the Great St. Bernard Pass, a feat that military historians would later rank alongside Hannibal's famous crossing 2,000 years earlier. The reality of that crossing had been far less romantic than Jacques-Louis David would later paint it. No rearing charger for Napoleon, who actually rode a sure-footed mule, no dramatic cape billowing in mountain winds, just thousands of men struggling up narrow paths, dragging artillery pieces disassembled and carried in hollowed-out tree trunks, losing fingers to frostbite and comrades to avalanches. After descending into Italy, you'd fought a series of small but sharp engagements as Napoleon manoeuvred to cut the Austrian supply lines. Then came Marengo itself, the battle that had nearly ended in disaster before becoming Bonaparte's latest miracle. And now you're marching again, eastward toward Milan, the capital of Lombardy and the political prize of the campaign. Your feet hurt, your uniform chafes where it's soaked through, and your empty stomach reminds you that the promised supply wagons still haven't fully caught up with the army. But the column's mood is surprisingly upbeat. Victory has a way of making discomfort more bearable. Men sing as they march old revolutionary songs mostly, with a few bawdier tavern tunes mixed in. Officers who might normally crack down on such informality let it pass. After Marengo, the army has earned some latitude. 3 days later, you reach Milan. The city welcomes the French army as liberators, at least officially. Civic leaders who only weeks earlier had pledged loyalty to Austria now proclaim their eternal devotion to France and First Consul Bonaparte. Flags are raised, speeches made, victory parades organised. For common soldiers like you, the city's welcome translates to more practical benefits. Real beds in requisitioned housing, decent food, and brief liberty to explore the city's taverns, cafes, and other entertainments. Now this, Marcel says, leaning back in a chair at a small cafe near Milan's magnificent cathedral, is how military campaigns should end. You have to agree. After weeks of hard marching, inadequate rations, and the terror of battle, civilization feels like an impossible luxury. The coffee in your cup is hot and strong, the bread on your plate is fresh, and for the first time in memory, you don't smell of sweat, mud, and gunpowder, having taken advantage of actual bathing facilities at your billet. Enjoy it while it lasts, Marcel advises, taking an appreciative sip of local wine. We'll be marching again before you know it. You think so? I heard the Austrians are negotiating. Marcel nods. They are, but signing papers doesn't mean the war's over. They're still fighting in Germany, and even if peace comes tomorrow, Bonaparte will find another war soon enough. He always does. There's no judgment in Marcel's voice, just the pragmatic assessment of a career soldier who has learned not to hope for long periods of peace. Napoleon's France is a nation perpetually at war, either with foreign enemies or its own counter-revolutionary factions. For men like Marcel, peace would mean unemployment at best, half-pay retirement at worst. As if to punctuate his point, a breathless young officer appears at your table, clearly searching for men from your regiment. "You two ninth light?" he demands. Marcel straightens. "Yes, Lieutenant." "Report to headquarters immediately. Fatigue detail." So much for your afternoon of leisure. Within the hour, you and Marcel are part of a working party unloading supply wagons in the courtyard of the Palazzo Reale, Milan's royal palace and Napoleon's temporary headquarters. As you labour, the palace buzzes with activity. Couriers come and go, bearing dispatches from other French armies and responses to Austrian peace overtures. Staff officers hurry between meetings, arms full of maps and documents. It's the nerve centre of an empire in the making, though in 1800 few would have predicted how far Napoleon's ambitions would eventually reach. Through an open window, you catch glimpses of the man himself working at a desk piled high with papers. Unlike his subordinates who seem harried and exhausted, Napoleon appears energized, moving from task to task with relentless focus. They say he needs only 4 hours of sleep per night, an inhuman schedule that leaves more time for the business of war and governance. "He never stops, does he?" you murmur to Marcel as you haul another crate of supplies. "That's why he wins," Marcel replies simply. "While other generals sleep, he plans. While kings hold court, he studies maps. He outworks everyone." It's an insight into Napoleon that historians would later confirm. His genius wasn't just tactical brilliance or personal courage, but an almost supernatural capacity for work, an ability to process information and make decisions faster than his opponents. The fatigue detail lasts well into evening. By the time you're dismissed, night has fallen over Milan, and all thoughts of enjoying the city's pleasures have been replaced by the simple desire for sleep. You stumble back to your billet, a small room shared with Marcel and 3 other soldiers in a requisitioned townhouse, and collapse onto your straw mattress without even removing your boots. For once, sleep comes easily, without the nightmares that often followed battle. Perhaps it's simple exhaustion, or perhaps it's the knowledge that, for now at least, you're safe. The Austrians are in retreat, peace negotiations are underway, and you've survived another campaign under the banner of the most successful general in Europe. As consciousness fades, your thoughts drift to Napoleon, still working by candlelight in his palace office while his soldiers sleep. What visions drive him? What ambitions keep him awake while others rest? What will he lead France to next? Those are questions for tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep the sleep of the victorious, deep and dreamless, and mercifully far from the bloodied fields of Marengo. A week passes in Milan. The rhythm of military occupation settles into something almost resembling normal life. Your regiment is assigned to guard duty at various points throughout the city. Mundane work compared to the terror and glory of battle, but nobody's complaining. Guard duty means regular meals, dry beds, and a distinct lack of people trying to kill you. After Marengo, such simple comforts feel like luxury. Today, you're posted outside the Palazzo Bologna, a magnificent aristocratic residence where high-level negotiations between French and Austrian representatives are taking place. The Austrians have sent Count Joseph von Neipperg to hammer out armistice terms with Napoleon's chief of staff, General Alexandre Berthier. "Stand up straight," Marcel hisses as a group of officers approaches the palace entrance. That's Berthier himself. You stiffen to attention as General Berthier passes, trailed by aides carrying map cases and document folios. He barely glances at you and Marcel, just 2 more anonymous soldiers among thousands. "Think they'll reach an agreement today?" you ask once the officers are inside. Marcel shrugs. "They will eventually. The Austrians don't have much choice after Marengo. It's just a question of how many concessions Bonaparte squeezes out of them. And then we go home?" Marcel gives you a pitying look. Maybe you do, if your enlistment's up. The rest of us go wherever Bonaparte points next. the doors open again, and this time it's the Austrian delegation arriving, somber men in white uniforms with green facings, their faces carefully blank as they pass between French guards. You notice they still wear their sidearms, a diplomatic courtesy that acknowledges their status as negotiators rather than prisoners. "That's Nyperg," Marcel says quietly, nodding toward a tall, distinguished-looking Austrian. "They say he's sleeping with Napoleon's wife back in Paris." "What? You nearly drop your musket in shock. How would you even know that?" "Rumours. The army runs on 'em. Probably not true, but makes for good gossip." Ironically, while the rumour about Josephine and Nyperg in 1800 was false, history would take a strange turn. Years later, after Napoleon divorced Josephine and married Marie-Louise of Austria, Nyperg would indeed become Marie-Louise's lover and eventually her husband after Napoleon's final defeat. But that's the future. For now, Count Nyperg is just a defeated Austrian trying to salvage what he can from negotiations with the victorious French. The morning passes slowly. Guard duty is mind-numbingly dull hours of standing at attention, punctuated by brief moments of activity when someone enters or exits the palace. Your legs ache, your back stiffens, and boredom becomes its own special form of torture. "What do you think they're talking about in there?" you ask Marcel during a quiet moment. "Territory, money, prisoners, the usual." Marcel's been through this before in previous campaigns. Bonaparte will demand northern Italy, maybe parts of Germany too. The Austrians will try to keep as much as they can. Eventually they'll reach a compromise that neither side loves, but both can live with. "And that's peace?" Marcel snorts. "That's a pause. Big difference." Around midday, the negotiations break for lunch. Servants appear with trays of food and wine, not for the guards, of course, but for the diplomats inside. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread wafts through the open doors, making your stomach growl despite the bread and cheese you had for breakfast. "Christ, I'm starving," you mutter. "Always are on guard duty," Marcel commiserates. "It's the standing still, burns more energy than marching somehow." As the diplomatic lunch continues inside, you notice a small commotion at the far end of the street. A crowd is gathering, parting to make way for someone. Then you hear it, the growing sound of cheers and applause, moving closer. "Bonaparte," Marcel says, straightening his posture. "Has to be." He's right. Moments later, Napoleon himself appears, walking briskly toward the palace. Unlike his usual military entourage, he's accompanied by just 2 aides and seems to be in civilian dress, a simple dark coat and white breeches rather than his military uniform. The crowd follows at a respectful distance, ordinary Milanese citizens straining for a glimpse of the man who has become the most famous figure in Europe. Some call out his name, others simply applaud. Napoleon acknowledges them with brief nods but doesn't slow his pace. As he reaches the palace steps, you and Marcel snap to attention, presenting arms with parade ground precision. Napoleon pauses, his sharp gaze taking in your regiment's insignia. "The 9th Light," he remarks. "You were at Marengo." "Yes, citizen first consul," you both answer in unison. Napoleon studies your faces for a moment, and to your surprise, a flicker of recognition crosses his features as he looks at you. "We've met before, soldier." You're stunned that he remembers. "Yes, citizen first consul, the morning after the battle." He nods, satisfied. "How is morale in the city?" "Good, citizen first consul," Marcel answers. "The men are well rested and well fed." "Excellent. They've earned it." With that, Napoleon continues into the palace, leaving you and Marcel exchanging astonished glances. "Did that just happen?" you whisper once he's gone. "Again?" "His memory is unnatural," Marcel says, shaking his head in wonder. "They say he knows thousands of his soldiers by name, remembers details about their service, their hometowns, their families." It's another element of the Bonaparte legend, his ability to connect with common soldiers, to make each man feel personally valued. Whether it's a calculated political skill or genuine interest hardly matters. The effect is the same: unshakable loyalty from the ranks. Inside the palace, the tempo of negotiations shifts with Napoleon's arrival. Though you can't hear what's being said, the pattern of people coming and going, aides rushing with documents, officers being summoned and dismissed, suggests increasing urgency. "He's taking over," Marcel observes. "Berthier was just keeping the chair warm." By late afternoon, an unusual stillness has fallen over the palace. No more messengers rushing in and out, no more huddles of staff officers discussing developments. Whatever is happening inside has reached a critical stage. When the doors finally open around dusk, both delegations emerge together. French and Austrian officers intermingled, their expressions professional but noticeably relaxed compared to earlier. Behind them comes Napoleon, deep in conversation with Count Nyperg. "It's done," Marcel murmurs. "Look at them." You see what he means. The body language has changed completely. There's still formality, but the tension has dissipated. Whatever terms have been agreed upon, both sides seem reasonably satisfied or at least resigned. Napoleon and Nyperg pause at the top of the palace steps. They shake hands firmly, exchange a few final words, then part ways Nyperg to rejoin his Austrian colleagues, Napoleon to confer with Berthier and his staff. As darkness falls, you and Marcel are finally relieved from your post by the night watch. Your legs are cramping from hours of standing, and your empty stomach has progressed from complaining to outright rebellion. "Come on," Marcel says. "I know a tavern near our billet, not too expensive." The tavern is crowded with off-duty French soldiers and curious locals. Despite the language barrier, a rowdy camaraderie has developed, aided by the universal translators of wine, music, and mutual curiosity. You find a small table in the corner, and Marcel somehow procures 2 bowls of hearty bean soup and a carafe of local wine. "To peace," he says, raising his cup, "however temporary." You clink cups and take a grateful swallow. The wine is rough but honest, warming you from the inside. "So, what happens now?" you ask between spoonfuls of soup. "Now?" Marcel tears off a chunk of bread. "Now the first consul becomes more powerful than ever. Marengo's made him untouchable. The revolution's over, my friend. Bonaparte's France is beginning. Is that good or bad?" Marcel considers the question seriously. "Depends. For soldiers, probably good, at least for a while. He takes care of the army. For France, who knows? He's brought order after chaos, which most people appreciate, but men with that much ambition rarely stop reaching for more. You're not much for politics. Your enlistment in the French army had been more about escaping poverty than revolutionary ideals. But even you can sense the historical weight of what's happening, the French Revolution's turbulent energy channeling itself into one extraordinary man's vision. They're saying he'll be named consul for life, Marcel continues, lowering his voice, though the tavern's noise makes it unlikely anyone could overhear. First step to becoming king in all but name. Isn't that against everything the revolution stood for? Revolutions devour themselves, kid. Always have, always will. The idealists start them, then the pragmatists take over, then the strong men restore order. Tale as old as time. Before you can respond, the tavern door bursts open and a breathless young officer appears. The room gradually quiets as he makes his way to the centre. "For citizens, soldiers of France," he announces, his voice carrying above the diminishing conversation, "I bring news from the Palazzo Serbelloni. The Convention of Alessandria has been signed." A murmur runs through the crowd. "Austria cedes all territory in Italy, north of the Po River." The officer continues. All Austrian forces must withdraw behind the Mincio River within 2 weeks. The fortresses of Tortona, Alessandria, Milan, Turin, and Genoa are to be surrendered to French control. The tavern erupts in cheers. Men pound tables, raise glasses, embrace each other. In one stroke, Napoleon has regained nearly everything France lost in Italy during his absence in Egypt. The campaign that began with the daring crossing of the Alps has concluded with complete success. And one more announcement, the officer shouts over the celebration. The first consul will depart for Paris within 3 days. Units assigned to the Army of Italy will remain under General Massena's command. All others will prepare to return to France. This news brings another round of cheers, especially from those like you whose regiments aren't part of the occupation force. Going home, or at least back to France, is a prospect worth celebrating. "Looks like you might get your wish after all," Marcel says, refilling your cup. "Paris isn't home, but it's closer than Milan." The tavern celebration continues well into the night. Songs are sung old revolutionary anthems mostly, with lyrics hastily updated to praise Bonaparte rather than abstract notions of liberty. Toasts are made to France, to the army, to the first consul, to fallen comrades. A few brave souls even attempt to teach French drinking songs to the bemused Italian tavern staff. It's past midnight when you and Marcel finally stagger back to your billet, pleasantly drunk and buoyed by the news of peace and homeward movement. The streets of Milan are still lively despite the hour other soldiers and civilians continuing impromptu celebrations. Torches and lanterns illuminating the ancient thoroughfares. "You know what's strange?" Marcel slurs slightly as you navigate the narrow lanes. "This whole campaign, barely 6 weeks from start to finish, crossed the Alps, won some skirmishes, lost a battle, won it again, secured northern Italy, signed a peace treaty. 6 weeks. Most campaigns take years." He's right. The speed of the Italian campaign has been breathtaking, a testament to Napoleon's style of warfare, rapid movement, decisive concentration of forces, and immediate political exploitation of military success. It's a new kind of war for a new century, and conventional powers like Austria are struggling to adapt. The next morning brings the predictable consequences of celebratory excess-pounding headaches and queasy stomachs, but it also brings new orders. Your regiment, along with several others from Lanz's division, will indeed be returning to France as part of Napoleon's escort. "Could be worse," Marcel comments as you pack your meagre belongings. "Escort duty means decent roads and regular supplies. Better than staying here to garrison Milan through winter." The preparations for departure consume the next 2 days. Equipment is checked, damaged items replaced, ammunition distributed, administrative matters are handled with surprising efficiency, pay arrears settled, casualty lists finalized, commendations recorded. Throughout it all, a sense of accomplishment permeates the army. These men have participated in something extraordinary, a campaign that will feature in history books and military academies for generations to come. They've followed Napoleon Bonaparte over the Alps, like Hannibal's legendary crossing, fought against overwhelming odds at Marengo, and emerged victorious. On the morning of the 3rd day, you assemble with your regiment in Milan's main square. The mood is festive despite the early hour. Local dignitaries have organised a farewell ceremony, complete with speeches, musical performances, and presentations of ceremonial gifts to Napoleon and his senior officers. Napoleon himself appears just as the sun fully clears the horizon. He's back in military uniform now, the simple green coat of a colonel of the chasseurs à cheval that he prefers for travel. He looks rested and energized, a man satisfied with his accomplishments but already focused on what comes next. The farewell ceremony is mercifully brief by diplomatic standards, less than an hour of speeches and formalities before the order is given to march. As the regiments form into column, Napoleon rides to the head of the procession, accompanied by his personal guard and senior staff. And just like that, you're leaving Milan, retracing your steps across northern Italy, this time as part of a triumphant procession rather than an invading army. The pace is deliberately measured about 15 miles per day, comfortable enough to avoid exhaustion, but sufficient to make steady progress toward France. So different from coming here, you comment to Marcel as you march. No forced marches, no short rations, no Austrians trying to kill us. Enjoy it, he advises. Peace never lasts. The journey takes on an almost ceremonial quality. In each town and village, local officials organize welcomes for the first consul. Women toss flowers, children wave improvised tricolour flags. Feasts are prepared for officers while common soldiers receive at least token hospitality. It's like a Roman triumph, Marcel observes after one such reception. The conquering hero returns in glory. The comparison is apt. Napoleon has consciously modelled many aspects of his public image on ancient Rome, from his close-cropped Brutus hairstyle to the eagles that will soon crown French regimental standards. The Roman parallels feed his legend and align him with classical virtues of discipline, courage, and civic duty. 6 days into the journey, you reach the foothills of the Alps, the same mountains that posed such a formidable challenge during your advance into Italy now stand as the final barrier between you and France. But this crossing will be different: better weather, established routes, proper supplies. The night before beginning the ascent, your regiment camps near a small Italian village nestled against the mountain's slopes. As darkness falls, campfires blossom across the valley floor, thousands of pinpricks of light marking the presence of Napoleon's returning army. You sit with Marcel and others from your company, sharing wine purchased from villagers and trading stories of the campaign. The conversation eventually turns to Marengo itself, the pivotal moment that transformed the entire expedition from potential disaster to unqualified success. "I still don't understand how we won," a young recruit admits. "We were beaten, actually beaten. I was running away, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. How did it turn around so fast?" "De Zeix's arrival helped," an older sergeant answers. "Fresh troops when we needed them most. And Kellerman's cavalry charge," another adds. "Never seen anything like it. 400 horsemen breaking thousands of Austrian grenadiers. But it was Bonaparte who put it all together," Marcel says quietly. "Any other general would have accepted defeat, tried to save what he could. He refused to lose, so he didn't." There's murmured agreement around the fire. Whatever his other qualities, Napoleon Bonaparte possesses an indomitable will that seems to bend reality to his purposes. It's a trait that inspires both admiration and unease, even among his devoted soldiers. As the fire burns down to embers and men begin to seek their bedrolls, you find yourself strangely reflective. The campaign has changed you in ways you're only beginning to understand. You've seen death up close, experienced the chaotic terror of battle, witnessed history being made by extraordinary individuals. "Marcel," you say as you both prepare for sleep, "do you ever wonder what all this is for? The fighting, the dying, the treaties that won't last?" He's quiet for a long moment, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Sometimes," he finally answers, "but I've stopped looking for meaning in the grand sweep of things. There's just the duty in front of you, the comrades beside you, and the life you make between battles." "That's it?" "That's plenty." He rolls onto his side, pulling his blanket tighter. "Get some sleep. We start climbing tomorrow." As you lie back on your simple bedroll, so different from your comfortable bed at home, you ponder Marcel's philosophy. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps there is no greater meaning to find in empires rising and falling, in borders being drawn and redrawn by men like Napoleon Bonaparte. Or perhaps you're simply too close to these events to see their true significance. Maybe future generations will look back on this time on Marengo, on Napoleon's rise, on this entire era of revolution and war, and discern patterns and purpose that remain invisible to those living through them. The thought is somehow comforting as you drift towards sleep, the distant silhouette of the Alps black against the night sky, the same mountains Hannibal crossed with his elephants that countless armies have traversed throughout history. You're just one more soldier making that journey, playing your small part in a story that began long before you and will continue long after. Tomorrow, you'll begin climbing toward France, toward whatever future awaits in Napoleon's rapidly evolving empire. But tonight, under the Italian stars, you rest with the simple satisfaction of having survived, of having witnessed history, of having marched with Napoleon Bonaparte during one of his finest hours, the miracle of Marengo. The crossing of the Alps is easier this time. Instead of the treacherous St. Bernard Pass with its narrow paths and deadly precipices, Napoleon's returning column takes the broader, gentler Mont-Cenis route. Instead of spring snowstorms and freezing temperatures, you march under clear summer skies. Instead of dragging disassembled artillery through snow and ice, you travel with minimal baggage on well-maintained roads. It's almost disappointingly mundane after the legendary difficulty of your outward journey. Not quite as heroic this time, is it? Marcel comments as you make steady progress up the switchback path. Won't make for such a dramatic painting. He's referring to rumours that Napoleon has commissioned artwork depicting his Alpine crossing, though the actual paintings wouldn't appear until months later. When they did, Jacques-Louis David's famous portrayal would show Napoleon on a rearing stallion, cloak billowing dramatically, pointing the way forward like a conquering Caesar. The reality had been far less romantic. Bonaparte crossing on a sure-footed mule, wearing a plain greatcoat rather than a theatrical cape, guided by local shepherds rather than leading from the front. History and truth don't always match up, you observe. Marcel laughs. Now you're getting it. Half of what they'll say about this campaign will be bullshit, but impressive bullshit that serves France. So who cares? 3 days of steady climbing brings you to the pass itself. At the summit, many soldiers pause to look back at Italy spread below the land you fought for, conquered, and are now leaving behind. From this height, there's no sign of battlefields or blood, just peaceful valleys, distant villages, and the hazy blue shimmer of lakes. Hard to believe men die for places seen from this distance, a soldier next to you murmurs. The descent into France is almost celebratory. Word of Marengo has spread ahead of you, and villages along your route prepare welcomes for the returning army. Flowers are strewn in your path, local wine flows freely, and young women seek souvenirs from soldiers who fought in the famous victory. Told you, coming home is better than going to war, Marcel says, accepting a cup of wine from a smiling Savoyard girl. The deeper you move into France, the more elaborate these welcomes become. In larger towns, local officials organise formal receptions for Napoleon, while common soldiers like you benefit from public banquets and simple but genuine hospitality. This isn't just spontaneous gratitude. The government in Paris has been working overtime to shape the narrative of Marengo, transforming what was nearly a catastrophic defeat into a story of Napoleon's military genius. Bulletins describing the battle have been published in every newspaper in France, each version more flattering to the first consul than the last. By the time you reach Lyon, 10 days after crossing the Alps, the entire city seems to have turned out to welcome Napoleon. Banners hang from windows, civic guards stand at attention along the route, and crowds press close to catch a glimpse of the man himself. Your regiment is assigned to crowd control, keeping the route clear for Napoleon's procession through the city. It's not glamorous duty, but it offers an excellent view of the proceedings. "Look at this," Marcel says, with a mixture of admiration and cynicism. "Couple months ago, half these people probably supported the royalists. Now they're cheering Bonaparte like he's the second coming of Christ." He's not wrong. Lyon had been a hotbed of counter-revolutionary sentiment during the Terror, and many of its citizens still secretly favoured the return of the Bourbon monarchy. But Napoleon represented something different, neither the chaos of revolutionary extremism nor the backward-looking restoration of the old regime. He offered order without reaction, glory without terror, and after Marengo he also offered victory, which has always been the surest path to public adoration. The procession passes directly in front of your position Napoleon on horseback, acknowledging the cheers with his characteristic restrained gestures. He's accompanied by a glittering staff of generals and aides, but all eyes are on him alone. Even from a distance, you can sense his remarkable presence, the force of personality that allows this physically unimposing man to dominate rooms full of taller, louder, more conventionally charismatic figures. "They say he's going to change everything when he gets back to Paris," mutters a sergeant standing near you. "New constitution, new government structure, himself at the centre of it all. Isn't that what kings do?" Someone else whispers. The sergeant shrugs. "As long as my pay comes regular and we keep winning battles, he can call himself whatever he wants." It's a sentiment you hear repeatedly among the troops. After a decade of revolutionary turmoil, most soldiers, like most French citizens, care more about stability and success than abstract political principles. If Napoleon's growing power comes with victory abroad and peace at home, few will object to the erosion of republican ideals. 2 more days of marching bring you to Dijon, where Napoleon's procession separates from the main body of returning troops, while the first consul continues rapidly toward Paris with a small escort. The bulk of the army, including your regiment, follows at a more leisurely pace. He's in a hurry to capitalize on Marengo, Marcel explains as you watch Bonaparte's small column disappear along the northern road. Needs to get back to Paris while the victory's still fresh before his enemies can regroup. Does he have enemies after what he's accomplished? Marcel gives you a pitying look. "Everyone in power has enemies, kid, especially in France. We've executed one king and run another out of the country. We've had how many governments in the last 10 years? 6? 7? Power's never secure, no matter how many battles you win." It's another week before you reach Paris yourself. The capital is in a state of barely controlled celebratory chaos when your regiment marches through the Barrière d'Italie and into the city proper. The streets are thronged with people waving tricolour flags and calling out congratulations to the returning soldiers. Vive Bonaparte, vive l'armée, vive la France. The chants blend together into a continuous roar of approval. For common soldiers, the adulation is both gratifying and slightly embarrassing. You've done your duty, followed orders, survived through a combination of skill and luck. To be treated as heroes for actions that felt like desperate survival in the moment is strange, but not unwelcome. Enjoy it while it lasts, Marcel advises, nodding to acknowledge a pretty girl who tosses a flower in his direction. Public memory is short. Next week they'll be complaining about the price of bread again. Your regiment is billeted in a former monastery near the Seine, hastily converted to military housing. After weeks on the road, sleeping on ground or in peasant haylofts, the simple barracks feel luxurious, actual beds with straw mattresses, washing facilities, and a mess hall serving regular hot meals. Now this, you sigh, stretching out on your assigned cot, is what victory should feel like. Don't get too comfortable, Marcel warns. They'll find something for us to do soon enough. The army doesn't pay men to lounge around Paris. He's right, of course. Within days, your regiment receives new assignments, guard duty at government buildings, parade ground drills for public display, escort services for visiting dignitaries. It's not combat, but it keeps you busy and visible. A constant reminder to Parisians of the military foundations supporting Bonaparte's government. During off-duty hours, you explore the capital. Paris in the summer of 1800 is a city caught between revolutionary fervour and imperial ambition. Many buildings still bear the scars of revolutionary vandalism, churches with defaced saints, public buildings with royal emblems chiselled away. Yet new construction is everywhere, much of it explicitly celebrating Napoleon's victories in forms reminiscent of ancient Rome. The old gives way to the new, Marcel observes, as you pass a medieval church being repurposed as a temple of victory, complete with Roman-style fasces and eagles. That's Bonaparte for you, keeping what works from the past, replacing what doesn't. It's a perceptive assessment of Napoleon's emerging governing philosophy. Unlike the revolutionary purists who sought to erase all traces of France's monarchical and Catholic heritage, Bonaparte recognises the value of tradition, of symbols and institutions that provide continuity and stability. He's building something new, yes, but incorporating useful elements from what came before. One evening, about 2 weeks after your arrival in Paris, you and Marcel find yourselves in a small tavern near the Palais Royal, enjoying a rare night of liberty. The place is crowded with a mix of off-duty soldiers, government clerks, and ordinary Parisians, creating a lively but not rowdy atmosphere. At a nearby table, a heated discussion is underway among a group of well-dressed young men, lawyers or minor officials from their appearance. Though you're not deliberately eavesdropping, their increasingly loud debate is impossible to ignore. Exactly what the revolution was supposed to prevent, one of them insists, pounding the table for emphasis. Power concentrated in one man's hands. And what would you prefer? His companion counters. The Directory's corruption, the Convention's terror. Bonaparte at least gets things done. At what cost to liberty? Liberty? What good is abstract liberty to people who can't feed their families? Bonaparte has stabilised the currency, reopened churches without counter-revolution, made peace with our enemies and restored French pride. I'll take that over your precious theoretical liberty. Marcel catches your eye, nodding slightly toward the arguing men. Hear that? That's Paris for you. Everyone's a political philosopher after 3 glasses of wine. But there's something compelling about the debate. It articulates tensions you've felt, but couldn't express the contradiction between revolutionary ideals and Napoleon's increasingly personal rule, between democratic principles and the practical benefits of effective autocracy. What do you think? You ask Marcel quietly. Are we betraying the revolution by supporting Bonaparte? He considers the question seriously, taking a thoughtful sip of wine before answering. Depends what you think the revolution was really about. If it was about abstract principles, liberty, equality, fraternity, all that, then maybe yes. But if it was about making France stronger, giving ordinary people a chance at better lives, breaking the stranglehold of ancient privileges, then no. He glances toward the arguing men, now deep in debate about the proposed lifetime consulship for Napoleon. Those fellows have the luxury of worrying about political theory. Most people just want to live without fear of the mob or the guillotine. Bonaparte gives them that. Your conversation is interrupted by a commotion at the tavern door. A group of soldiers enters, not French but foreign. From their distinctive green uniforms with red facings, you recognise them as members of the Irish Legion, a unit of Irish exiles who've thrown in their lot with France against their British oppressors. The Irish are celebrating something, already half drunk and looking for more wine and company. Their leader, a tall man with captain's insignia and a shock of red hair, scans the room before his gaze falls on your table. "French comrades," he calls in heavily accented French. "Room for a few poor Irish boys?" Before you can respond, Marcel waves them over with typical veterans' hospitality. "Pull up chairs. Any enemy of England is a friend of ours." The Irish introduce themselves as they settle around your table. Their captain is named Michael Dwyer, once a rebel leader in the failed 1798 uprising against British rule in Ireland, now an officer in Napoleon's foreign legions. "To Bonaparte," Dwyer proposes, raising his glass. "The only man in Europe who can break the English stranglehold on my country." You all drink to that. Relations between the Irish and French soldiers are naturally warm, both nations sharing a deep-seated hatred of England and a certain cultural appreciation for wine, women, and glorious lost causes. As more drinks are poured, Dwyer explains their celebration. "We've received new orders. The Legion is being expanded, trained for something big. Word is Bonaparte's planning something special for the English." "Another invasion?" Marcel asks, lowering his voice despite the tavern's noise. Dwyer shrugs. "Who knows, but we're recruiting every Irishman we can find, training harder than ever. Something's coming." This is your first hint of what would eventually become known as the Army of England, Napoleon's massive force assembled at Bologna for a potential cross-channel invasion. Though the invasion would ultimately never materialise, the threat would keep Britain on edge for years and serve as a powerful diplomatic lever in European politics. The evening progresses from political discussion to shared war stories to increasingly boisterous singing. The Irish teach you rebel songs that would earn a hanging back in British territory. You respond with French marching tunes celebrating victories over various European enemies. By closing time, Franco-Irish brotherhood has been thoroughly cemented through the universal languages of alcohol and anti-English sentiment. You and Marcel stagger back toward your barracks sometime after midnight, supporting each other through the dark Parisian streets. The capital is never truly quiet, even at this hour. There are still people abroad, from late revellers to early market workers preparing for dawn business. "Good lads! Those Irish," Marcel slurs slightly. "Remind me of us after Valmy back in '92. True believers." You were at Valmy. You've heard of the battle, of course, the Republic's first major victory, when raw revolutionary volunteers defeated professional Prussian troops and saved the young revolution. Was barely older than you are now, Marcel confirms. Scared shitless but determined. We all thought we were changing the world forever. He laughs, but there's a touch of melancholy in it. Maybe we did, just not in the way we expected. The comparison between revolutionary volunteers and Irish rebels strikes a chord. Both fought for ideals larger than themselves, for concepts of liberty and nationhood that transcended personal safety. It makes you wonder about the nature of the army you serve in now, professional, disciplined, fighting not for abstract principles, but for Napoleon Bonaparte's vision of France. Do you miss it? You ask. The Revolutionary Army? The cause? Marcel considers the question as you navigate around a sleeping beggar. Sometimes it was chaotic, amateur, badly supplied, but we believed in something bigger than any general or politician. Now we're a better army in every practical way, but... He trails off, then shrugs. But that's getting old and sentimental. Bonaparte's France is what we have now, and it's not so bad, better than what came before or what might have come instead. You reach your barracks just as the eastern sky begins to lighten. Dawn will bring another day of duties in Paris, another small contribution to Napoleon's consolidating regime. The debate from the tavern still echoes in your mind: liberty versus security, revolutionary ideals versus practical governance. But as you fall into your cot, exhaustion and wine overwhelming deeper thoughts, you recognize that such philosophical questions are luxury for men in your position. You're a soldier, and soldiers follow orders. The larger meaning of those orders, the political direction of France. The ultimate legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte is for historians to debate, not for you to decide. Sleep comes quickly, dreamless and deep. In that, at least, victory and peace have tangible benefits. No pre-battle anxiety, no fear of midnight attacks or dawn mobilizations. Just rest, well earned after a campaign that transformed both Europe's political landscape and your own understanding of war and leadership. Tomorrow will bring new duties, new experiences in a Paris rapidly reshaping itself in Napoleon's image. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of a former monastery converted to military use, itself a metaphor for France's transformation, you sleep the untroubled sleep of a soldier who has survived to see victory's aftermath. Your comfortable bed at home remains far away, but these simple barracks with their straw mattresses feel luxurious after months of campaign hardship. As consciousness fades, you reflect that this too is part of Bonaparte's appeal, his ability to make hard circumstances bearable through purpose and pride, to transform ordinary men into participants in extraordinary events. Whether that makes him a hero or a manipulator is a question for wiser minds than yours. For now, sleep claims you, and Paris continues its restless evolution around you, the city and nation bending gradually but inexorably to the will of the man who snatched victory from defeat on the plains of Marengo. The weeks in Paris blend together in a rhythm of duty and rest. Summer heat blankets the city, turning narrow streets into stifling canyons and making your woolen uniform a special kind of torture during ceremonial parades. Bonaparte should have thought of summer uniforms. If he's going to keep us marching around for the public, you grumble, one particularly sweltering afternoon after spending 4 hours standing at attention during a civic celebration at the Champ de Mars. Could be worse, Marcel reminds you, wiping sweat from his neck. Could be wearing Austrian white in an Italian summer or dying of thirst in some Egyptian desert. He has a point. Discomfort is relative when you've experienced true hardship. After Marengo, after the desperate hours when death seemed certain, mere heat and boredom are minor inconveniences. And there are compensations. Paris in 1800 is entering a golden period, the chaos of the revolution fading, the excesses of imperial splendour not yet begun. It's a city catching its breath, cautiously embracing stability under Napoleon's firm but not yet oppressive hand. On your free evenings, you explore neighbourhoods that would have been forbidden to a common soldier under the monarchy. The elegant gardens of the Tuileries, the grand boulevards, the newly established museums filled with artistic treasures, liberated from conquered territories. Strange to think most of this was closed to people like us before the Revolution, you observe to Marcel as you stroll through the Jardin du Luxembourg one pleasant evening watching fashionable Parisians promenade along gravel paths. That's what we fought for, he replies, not just to replace one master with another, but to open doors. He gestures to the diverse crowd, merchants, professionals, artisans, and yes, common soldiers, all mixing in spaces once reserved for nobility. Whatever else happens, they can't put that back in the bottle. Time passes in gentle waves. Your regiment settles into garrison routine, guard duties, training exercises, occasional ceremonial appearances. The urgent intensity of campaign gives way to the quieter discipline of peacetime service. You learn that Napoleon has wasted no time capitalizing on his Marengo victory. News trickles down through the military hierarchy of constitutional changes, diplomatic initiatives, and internal reforms, all aimed at consolidating the first consul's power while rebuilding France after a decade of revolutionary turmoil. "He's rewriting everything," an officer comments during an inspection. Legal code, educational system, church relations, provincial administration. It's like he's rebuilding France from the foundation up. One warm August evening, you find yourself assigned to guard duty at the Tuileries Palace, where Napoleon has established his residence and governmental offices. It's considered a prestige assignment, usually given to members of the consular guard rather than line infantry like you. "Someone must have remembered you," Marcel suggests when you receive the orders. The first consul himself, maybe. You scoff at the idea, but can't help wondering. Those 2 brief encounters, after Marengo and in Milan, hardly seem significant enough for Napoleon to remember you among thousands of soldiers. Yet here you are, posted outside the very heart of French government. The duty itself is uneventful. You stand at your assigned position, maintaining ceremonial stillness while officials, officers, and diplomats come and go. The summer evening stretches long, golden light gradually giving way to the soft blues of dusk. As darkness falls, lanterns are lit throughout the palace gardens. From your post, you can see into a ground-floor room where clerks work late, copying documents and organising papers, the machinery of state grinding on even as the city around it prepares for sleep. "Makes you wonder what they're all working on," murmurs the guard stationed opposite you, breaking protocol with the whispered observation. "Probably boring stuff," you whisper back. "Tax records, appointment letters, or plans for the next war." The comment hangs in the warm evening air. Despite the recent victories and peace negotiations, few believe Europe's conflicts are truly over. Napoleon's France remains surrounded by suspicious powers, Britain unreachable across the Channel, Austria smarting from defeat, Russia unpredictable under its eccentric Tsar Paul. Near midnight, as your shift nears its end, unusual activity draws your attention. A small group emerges from the palace, just 3 men moving with purpose rather than ceremony. Even in the dim lantern light, you recognize the central figure immediately. Napoleon Bonaparte walks briskly between 2 aides, heading not toward the main gates, but to a smaller side entrance where a plain carriage waits. He's dressed simply, without the usual uniform or insignia that would mark his rank. As the group passes your position, Napoleon glances in your direction. There's a flicker of recognition in his eyes, quickly replaced by the distracted look of a man preoccupied with weightier matters. He offers the slightest nod, acknowledgement rather than greeting, before continuing on his way. The carriage departs without fanfare, rolling quietly into the Parisian night on some errand unknown to common soldiers. Where do you think he's going at this hour? Your fellow guard wonders. Oh, who knows? Secret meeting? Midnight inspection? Visiting a woman? The last suggestion earns a stifled laugh. Bonaparte's marriage to Josephine is famously complicated. Periods of passionate devotion interspersed with equally passionate affairs on both sides. Imagine being him, the other guard muses, 30 years old and master of France, the whole country hanging on your every decision. It's a sobering thought. Napoleon Bonaparte is barely a decade older than you, yet carries responsibilities that would crush most men. Whatever his ambitions and flaws, his capacity for work is legendary. 18-hour days filled with meetings, correspondence, planning sessions, all managed with relentless efficiency. When your replacement arrives at midnight, you return to barracks through a Paris transformed by darkness. The revolutionary government has yet to implement the street lighting that will eventually make this the city of light. For now, it remains a patchwork of illumination and shadow. Bright shops and cafes alongside pitch-black alleys, the occasional oil lamp marking street corners. Back in barracks, you find Marcel still awake, playing cards with several other veterans in the dimly lit common room. "How was palace duty?" he asks as you join them. "Dull. Saw Bonaparte, though." That draws interest from the table. Even for experienced soldiers, Napoleon remains a figure of fascination. The artillery officer from Corsica who rose to command armies and now governs France. What was he doing? Sneaking out in an unmarked carriage around midnight. Marcel chuckles. Affairs of state, or just affairs? The older veterans laugh knowingly. For all his military genius and political skill, Bonaparte remains human, subject to the same passions and weaknesses as other men. It's part of his appeal to common soldiers, the sense that, despite his extraordinary abilities, he shares certain fundamental traits with them. Either way, Marcel adds, dealing you into their game. Not our concern. We follow orders, not gossip. The next morning brings news that partially answers the previous night's mystery. Notices posted throughout Paris announce that the first consul has departed on an unannounced tour of northern departments, visiting cities including Amiens, Calais and Bologna. "Checking the channel, defences," Marcel observes, reading the announcement over your shoulder. "Still worried about the English, even after Marengo." It's a reminder that France's greatest enemy remains unconquered. While Austria might sue for peace after battlefield defeats, Britain, protected by its navy and island geography, can continue the fight indefinitely. The one opponent Napoleon cannot directly engage remains his most persistent threat. With Bonaparte absent from Paris, the city's rhythms subtly change. Government business continues under the direction of the other consuls, Cambacérès and Lebrun, but lacks the driving energy of Napoleon's presence. Military reviews are conducted by lesser generals. Diplomatic receptions feel somehow diminished. For common soldiers like you, little changes in practical terms. The same duties, the same training exercises, the same off-duty recreations in the city's taverns and gardens. Yet there's a palpable sense of waiting, as if Paris holds its breath until its master returns. 2 weeks later, Napoleon comes back to a capital eager for his presence. Though no official reception is planned, crowds gather spontaneously along his route from the city gates to the Tuileries, cheering the first consul as his carriage passes. "They love him, like he's already emperor," comments a cynical old sergeant watching the scene. So much for the Republic. The sergeant's prediction proves increasingly accurate as autumn approaches. Though Napoleon maintains republican forms, his personal authority grows steadily more absolute. New constitutional changes are proposed, each enhancing the first consul's powers while preserving a facade of representative government. For the army, these political developments matter less than practical concerns, pay, provisions, promotions. As summer fades into fall, rumours circulate about unit reassignments, potential new campaigns, changes to military organisation and leadership. "They're saying we might be sent to the Rhine frontier," Marcel tells you one evening in late September, returning from a meeting of non-commissioned officers. Austria's making noise again despite the armistice. I thought Marengo settled things. He shakes his head. Nothing's ever settled in this war. Victories buy time, not peace. It's a sobering assessment from a man who's seen nearly a decade of continuous conflict between revolutionary France and the monarchies of Europe. The coalition against France has formed, dissolved, and reformed repeatedly since 1792, each round of fighting ending in temporary truces rather than lasting resolution. So we'll be marching again soon. Probably. Marcel doesn't seem particularly concerned by the prospect. For career soldiers like him, campaign has become a seasonal occupation, summer for fighting, winter for recovery and preparation. But not before spring, I'd guess. Even Bonaparte respects winter. The prediction proves accurate. Through October and November, Paris settles into a pattern of grey skies and increasing cold. Your regiment remains in the capital, transitioning from ceremonial duties to winter training and maintenance. In the quieter rhythm of these months, you find unexpected opportunities for reflection. The frantic pace of campaign, with its immediate concerns of survival and victory, gives way to larger questions about purpose and meaning. What is France becoming under Napoleon Bonaparte? What role do common soldiers play in shaping this new nation emerging from revolutionary chaos? Do you ever wonder what's coming next? You ask Marcel one evening as you both clean equipment in the barracks common room. Not just the next battle or campaign, but everything. He considers the question, methodically polishing his musket lock. Sometimes I think we're watching history reshape itself. The old world of kings and nobles is dying but not dead. The revolutionary dream of perfect liberty proved impossible. So we're building something in between, Bonaparte's France. And what is that exactly? Marcel shrugs. A place where a Corsican artillery officer can rise to rule based on talent rather than birth, where soldiers like us have a path forward that wasn't possible before. Not perfect liberty maybe, but better opportunities than our fathers had. It's a pragmatic assessment, focused on tangible improvements rather than abstract ideals. Like many who've lived through the revolution's bloody excesses, Marcel has become skeptical of grand philosophical claims, preferring the concrete benefits of Napoleon's more ordered society. As December arrives, bringing bitter cold and occasional snow, news reaches Paris that reshapes European politics once again. General Moreau, commanding the Army of the Rhine, has won a decisive victory over the Austrians at Hohenlinden, deep in Bavarian territory. Another miracle, officers comment, studying reports of the battle. Moreau caught the Austrians in a snowstorm, cut their army to pieces. Combined with Marengo, the victory at Hohenlinden leaves Austria with no choice but to seek serious peace. Negotiations accelerate, culminating in the Treaty of Lunéville signed in February 1801, a comprehensive settlement that confirms French control of northern Italy, establishes client republics under French protection, and pushes French borders to the Rhine. Bonaparte's done it, Marcel observes, when news of the treaty reaches your barracks. Finished what the revolution started. France is larger now than at any time since Charlemagne. The historical comparison isn't accidental. Napoleon has deliberately cultivated parallels with the medieval emperor who united Western Europe under Frankish rule. From the eagle standards of his armies to the classical titles of his government, Bonaparte draws on imperial imagery while maintaining nominal republican forms. Winter deepens, transforming Paris. The Seine freezes in particularly cold spells, its surface becoming an impromptu highway and recreational space. During off-duty hours, you sometimes join other soldiers skating on the river using crude wooden blades strapped to boots. A novel experience for a southern farm boy who rarely saw ice before military service. Not bad, Marcel laughs, watching your wobbly progress, but I wouldn't try that in Russia. They say winter there makes this look like springtime. Neither of you could know that 11 years later, Napoleon's Grande Armée would test that reputation firsthand, with catastrophic results. For now, Russian winter remains an abstract concept, a distant extreme against which to measure your own discomfort. As 1801 advances, the focus of French foreign policy shifts from Austria to the last remaining enemy, Great Britain. With continental threats temporarily neutralized, Napoleon can concentrate on the persistent island adversary that finances coalitions against France and controls the seas. They're expanding coastal defences everywhere, reports an officer recently returned from Bologna, building gunboats, training troops for amphibious operations. The first consul is serious about taking the war to England. Whether such preparations represent genuine invasion plans or elaborate diplomatic pressure remains unclear to common soldiers. For the army, these strategic calculations matter less than immediate concerns: training, equipment, the possibility of campaign when weather improves. In late March, as the first hints of spring appear in Paris gardens, your regiment receives long-anticipated new orders. You're to depart within the week for Bologna, joining the growing concentration of forces along the Channel coast. So it begins again. Marcel sighs, though without real regret. The professional soldier in him welcomes action after months of garrison duty. From Italy to the Channel, Bonaparte doesn't believe in letting armies get comfortable. The night before your departure, you make a final visit to a favourite tavern near the Palais Royal, a modest establishment that caters to soldiers and working people rather than fashionable society. It's become something of a ritual for you and Marcel, a place to mark transitions between phases of military life. The tavern is crowded but not raucous, filled with the comfortable murmur of conversation and occasional laughter. You find a small table in the corner where Marcel is already waiting with wine and bread. To Bologna, he proposes, raising his cup, and whatever comes next. You drink to that, savouring the simple red wine. After months in Paris, you've developed a modest appreciation for better vintages than the rough stuff typically available to campaigning troops. What do you think we'll find there, you ask? Actual invasion preparations, or just a show to worry the English? Marcel tears off a piece of bread, considering. Bit of both, probably. Bonaparte likes keeping his options open. Threaten invasion, force the English to negotiate, but be ready to cross the Channel if opportunity presents itself. Could we actually do it? Invade England? The question has circulated throughout the army since Napoleon began concentrating forces along the coast. For centuries, the Channel has protected Britain from continental enemies. Even the Spanish Armada, with all the resources of history's first global empire, failed to bridge that narrow but treacherous stretch of water. If anyone could manage it, it's Bonaparte, Marcel answers after a thoughtful pause. He makes the impossible happen. We've all seen it. He takes another sip of wine. But the English fleet is something else. Marengo was a close thing on land. At sea, we'd be even more disadvantaged. It's a fair assessment. For all his military genius, Napoleon cannot simply will away Britain's overwhelming naval superiority. The French fleet, degraded by revolutionary purges of its officer corps and years of blockade, remains decisively outmatched by the Royal Navy. As the evening progresses, your conversation drifts from military prospects to personal reflections. The Marengo campaign, now almost a year past, has shaped both your understanding of warfare and your view of Napoleon Bonaparte. I still think about those hours when we were losing, you admit quietly, when the battle seemed completely lost, how quickly everything changed. Marcel nods. That's Bonaparte's gift. Not just winning when everything goes according to plan, but salvaging victory from disaster. That's what separates him from ordinary generals. Is that enough, though, to justify everything else? The question isn't purely philosophical. In the months since Marengo, Napoleon has systematically dismantled remaining revolutionary institutions, replaced elected officials with appointed administrators, and concentrated authority in his own hands. The Republic exists increasingly in name only. Marcel doesn't answer immediately. He signals for another carafe of wine, watching the tavern's other patrons, soldiers like yourselves, labourers, shop clerks, the ordinary people of Paris whose lives continue regardless of who governs France. Most of them, he finally says, gesturing subtly toward the tavern's crowd, care more about bread prices and safe streets than who sits in the Tuileries or what they call themselves. The revolution promised liberty but delivered terror and uncertainty. Bonaparte promises security and national pride. After 10 years of chaos, that's enough for most. It's neither full endorsement nor outright condemnation, just the pragmatic assessment of a man who's survived revolution, terror, and multiple campaigns under revolutionary and now Napoleonic banners. You finish your wine in companionable silence, each lost in private thoughts. The tavern gradually empties as evening deepens toward night. Paris continues its life around you, ancient and ever-changing, capital of a nation being reshaped by one extraordinary man's vision and will. Tomorrow you march for Boulogne, leaving behind the relative comfort of garrison duty for whatever awaits on the Channel coast. Another chapter in your military service, another piece of the unfolding story of Napoleon's France. As you walk back to barracks through darkened streets, you realise how far you've come since that desperate day at Marengo. Not just in physical distance, but in understanding. You've witnessed history pivoting on the fulcrum of a single battle, seen how narrow the margin between defeat and victory can be, observed firsthand the man who increasingly dominates European affairs. The stars are visible above Paris tonight, the same stars that shone over Marengo's bloodied fields. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies Bologna, and beyond that, England, the unconquered enemy that continues to defy Napoleon's ambitions. What will come of these new preparations, these concentrations of force along the Channel? Will you find yourself crossing those waters in some unprecedented invasion, or simply participating in an elaborate strategic feint? The answer lies in the mind of Napoleon Bonaparte, whose genius and ambition drive France toward an uncertain future. For tonight, though, you're simply a soldier returning to barracks before tomorrow's march. Whatever grand historical forces swirl around Napoleon's regime, your immediate concerns remain immediate. Equipment to check, sleep to catch, comrades to march beside when morning comes. You reach the barracks, nodding to the sentry as you enter. Inside, preparations for departure are evident everywhere. Packs being assembled, weapons cleaned a final time, personal items carefully stowed for the journey. Marcel is already there, his few possessions organised with veteran efficiency. He glances up as you enter, offering a nod that communicates both acknowledgement and shared understanding. Whatever comes next, you'll face it together, two soldiers among thousands in Napoleon Bonaparte's ever-expanding ambitions. Outside, Paris settles towards sleep, unaware that within a few short years the first consul will become emperor, republic will transform to empire, and the modest victory at Marengo will be recognised as a pivotal moment in the rise of history's most remarkable military career. For now, though, there is just the quiet of barracks at night, the distant sounds of the city, and the certainty of tomorrow's march. Not so different, really, from your comfortable bed at home, the same stars overhead, the same human need for rest before facing whatever the new day brings. The road to Bologna unwinds before you like a pale ribbon through the greening French countryside. Spring has arrived in gentle stages, warmer days, softer rains, fields coming alive with new growth. After Paris's stone and timber confines, the open landscape feels liberating. Your regiment marches at a comfortable pace, about 15 miles each day, with regular rest periods and established campsites. No desperate forced marches like the Marengo campaign, no pressing enemy to confront, just the steady rhythm of boots on packed earth, the familiar weight of equipment settling into well-worn grooves on shoulders and hips. Marcel walks beside you, his weathered face relaxed beneath his shako hat. He seems more at ease outside the city, as if Paris's political complexities weighed on him more than he'd admitted. "Nothing like open country," he remarks on the third day, gesturing toward the rolling hills of Normandy spreading before you. "Reminds me why France is worth fighting for." The observation strikes a chord. Beyond abstract notions of liberty or republic or empire lies this tangible reality, the fields and forests, villages and vineyards that compose the nation itself. Whatever political form France takes under Napoleon's direction, this physical homeland remains constant. Each night, your regiment makes camp in or near small towns along the route. Unlike the suspicious or fearful receptions that often greeted revolutionary armies years earlier, these communities now welcome French soldiers with simple hospitality. Barns opened for sleeping, wells made available, sometimes even shared meals for officers and local officials. "They've grown used to us," Marcel observes after a particularly warm welcome in a village whose name you'll never remember. 10 years of armies marching back and forth across France. They've learned to adapt. Or they're genuinely grateful, you suggest. Bonaparte's brought stability, at least inside France. Marcel nods, conceding the point. Whatever one thinks of Napoleon's growing power, his government has ended the worst domestic chaos, suppressing both Jacobin extremism and royalist counter-revolution, establishing predictable administration, restoring basic services. "Peace at home, glory abroad," he says, quoting one of the regime's increasingly common slogans. Simple formula, but effective. After 10 days of steady marching, you reach the Channel coast. Bologna appears first as a smudge on the horizon, then gradually resolves into a busy port town transformed by military activity. The harbour bristles with masts, not majestic warships, but hundreds of smaller vessels being constructed or modified for some purpose not immediately apparent. "Invasion barges," Marcel explains, noticing your curiosity. "Flat-bottomed boats designed to carry troops across the Channel." The scale of preparation becomes clear as your regiment is assigned quarters in one of many sprawling camps surrounding the town. Tens of thousands of soldiers are already assembled here, with more arriving daily. Engineers direct continuous construction, barracks, fortifications, docks, signal stations. Artillery pieces are positioned along the coast, their barrels aimed toward the narrow strait where, on clear days, the white cliffs of England are faintly visible. "Is it really going to happen?" you ask Marcel that evening as you both stare out toward the darkening sea. "An invasion?" He squints toward the horizon, where the occasional light from an English patrol vessel is just visible. Maybe. Bonaparte's certainly investing resources as if he means it. But crossing those 20 miles of water against the Royal Navy, he shakes his head, would be his greatest gamble yet. The following weeks establish a new routine. Your regiment joins the larger army of the coasts of the ocean, the official name for this growing concentration of force. Daily training now includes unfamiliar elements, embarking and disembarking from flat-bottomed boats, forming columns directly from landing craft, operating in coordination with naval units. If this is just a diplomatic bluff, a sergeant comments during one particularly wet and miserable practice landing, it's the most thorough bluff in military history. Spring advances into early summer. The Channel's notoriously unpredictable weather gradually stabilizes, bringing more days suitable for potential crossing. Activity in the camps intensifies, creating a palpable sense of preparation for something significant. Then, in late June, unexpected news arrives. Napoleon Bonaparte himself is coming to inspect the Bologna forces. Get ready for the grand performance, Marcel tells you, as your company prepares for review. When Bonaparte inspects, everything must be perfect. The preparations are exhaustive. Uniforms are cleaned and mended, equipment polished to unprecedented shine, formations practiced until they achieve mechanical precision. Even the camps themselves are tidied, with pathways freshly gravelled and tent lines straightened to geometric perfection. When Napoleon arrives, he brings his characteristic energy and attention to detail. For 3 days, he inspects everything: troop formations, artillery positions, naval preparations, supply depots, medical facilities. Nothing escapes his penetrating assessment, from grand strategy to the condition of individual soldiers' equipment. Your regiment's review comes on the second day. Standing at rigid attention in formation, you experience the unique intensity of Napoleon's inspection, his rapid pace, quick questions to officers, occasional direct interaction with common soldiers, though he passes within feet of your position. This time, there's no recognition. You're simply one face among thousands, part of the human machinery being assembled for his ambitious plans. That evening, officers spread word of the first consul's assessment, generally positive, with specific areas requiring improvement. Napoleon's standards are exacting but achievable, his criticism constructive rather than demoralizing. The overall effect is to energize rather than discourage, exactly the response he intends. That's his gift, Marcel comments as you both clean equipment after the inspection. He knows exactly how to push without breaking, how to demand without demoralizing. The observation captures something essential about Napoleon's leadership style: his intuitive understanding of human psychology, his ability to extract maximum effort through carefully calibrated pressure and praise. As summer progresses, the camps at Bologna settle into a rhythm of intensive training interrupted by periodic heightened alerts, usually triggered by changes in weather or reports of British naval movements. These moments of anticipation invariably subside without actual embarkation orders, leaving an atmosphere of perpetual readiness without fulfillment. Beginning to think this is all for show, a cynical corporal remarks after one such false alarm in August. We'll sit here staring at England until winter makes crossing impossible, then declare victory somehow and go home. Marcel disagrees. Bonaparte doesn't invest this much in pure deception. We're preparing for a real crossing, just waiting for the right moment. That moment, when all necessary conditions align simultaneously, proves elusive. The Channel's unpredictable weather, the vigilant British Navy, the logistical challenges of moving a large army by sea, all combine to prevent the perfect opportunity Napoleon requires for such a high-risk operation. As summer fades toward autumn, the mood in the camps gradually shifts. The initial intensity of preparation gives way to a more measured, long-term perspective. Construction of more permanent facilities, winter barracks, improved roads, entertainment venues, suggests a recognition that the Army of the Coasts will remain at Boulogne well beyond the current campaign season. For you and Marcel, this evolving situation brings an unexpected development. In early September, your regiment receives orders for reassignment, not back to Paris, but to the naval base at Toulon on France's Mediterranean coast. Interesting, Marcel muses, reading the transfer orders posted outside company headquarters. Very interesting. What does it mean, you ask, sensing his analytical mind working through implications. Means Bonaparte's thinking beyond the Channel. Toulon means Mediterranean operations, Egypt perhaps, or support for our ally Spain against the English at Gibraltar. The redeployment order offers welcome change after months of Bologna's repetitive training and perpetual anticipation. Within days, your regiment is marching southward through the heart of France, exchanging Channel mists for progressively warmer, drier conditions as you move toward Provence. The journey becomes a tour of a nation transforming under Napoleon's direction. Towns and cities you pass through display visible changes since your previous encounters. Roads improved, public buildings under construction or renovation, new administrative offices bearing the regime's increasingly standardized insignia. He's remaking France in his image, Marcel observes, as you pass yet another construction site where workers are replacing revolutionary symbols with more classically inspired designs. Bit by bit, the Republic fades. Something new emerges. After 3 weeks of steady marching, you reach Toulon, France's great southern naval base, Mediterranean gateway, and site of the siege where a young artillery officer named Bonaparte first distinguished himself in 1793. The symmetry feels significant. The man who began his rise to prominence here now directs France's destiny from Paris. Your regiment's assignment in Toulon proves less dramatic than Marcel's speculation suggested. Rather than immediate preparation for exotic campaigns, you're tasked with routine security for naval installations, guarding docks, warehouses, and workshops where France's Mediterranean fleet is gradually being rebuilt following years of British naval dominance. The duty is undemanding compared to campaign or even the intensive training at Bologna, regular hours, decent quarters in converted maritime buildings, and the pleasant climate of southern France in autumn combine to create the most comfortable military service you've experienced. Don't get used to it, Marcel warns as you both enjoy wine at an outdoor cafe on a particularly beautiful October evening. Nothing lasts in Bonaparte's France, especially not comfortable assignments. He's right in principle, but wrong in immediate application. Your regiment remains in Toulon through autumn and into winter, settling into a sustainable routine that allows for something resembling normal life. Friendships formed with locals, favourite establishments identified, even modest personal comforts accumulated in your assigned quarters. News from Paris arrives regularly through official bulletins and private correspondence. Napoleon continues consolidating power, negotiating with the Catholic Church to restore religious peace, reforming education and legal systems, reconstructing France's administrative structure into forms that increasingly bypass republican institutions. Consul for life is next, predicts an officer who maintains connections in Paris. That's the rumour among government circles. The Senate will offer, Bonaparte will reluctantly accept, the Republic will take another step toward empire. The prediction proves accurate. In the spring of 1802, a series of political manoeuvres culminates in Napoleon being named consul for life, with enhanced powers to designate his successor. Though maintaining republican terminology, the position is effectively monarchical. Lifetime rule with hereditary implications. Around the same time, negotiations with Britain bear unexpected fruit. After months of diplomatic exchanges conducted against the backdrop of military preparations at Bologna and elsewhere, the two nations reach preliminary agreement on the Treaty of Amiens, a comprehensive peace that, at least temporarily, ends hostilities between France and its most persistent enemy. Peace with England, Marcel marvels when news reaches Toulon. Never thought I'd see it. The treaty brings practical changes to your military service. With Britain neutralised, if only temporarily, France's naval installations become less critical to immediate security. Your regiment's guard duties decrease, replaced by training exercises and public ceremonies celebrating the peace. For common soldiers, the most significant impact is the sudden availability of leave, permission to temporarily return home after years of continuous service. When the announcement is posted, an audible cheer rises from barracks throughout Toulon. Going home then? Marcel asks, as you both review the leave roster. The question gives you pause. After nearly 3 years of continuous service, home seems simultaneously appealing and strange, a place remembered but increasingly distant, populated by people who haven't shared your transformative experiences. Maybe, you answer. Oh, you? He shakes his head. Well, what home? The army's been my home since '92. My parents are dead, siblings scattered, nothing waiting for me in Picardy. His situation isn't unusual among career soldiers. The Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars have displaced countless individuals from their origins, creating new identities and affiliations that overshadow earlier connections. For many in the ranks, the regiment has become more family than biological relations. You decide to split the difference, taking half your allotted leave to visit home, then returning to spend the remainder in Toulon. Marcel seems quietly appreciative of the decision, though he'd never explicitly ask for companionship. The journey home is a strange interlude. Civilian clothes, civilian transportation, civilian interactions after years immersed in military culture. The physical landscape remains familiar, but you view it through eyes transformed by experience. The village that once seemed the centre of your universe now feels small, provincial, oddly untouched by the historic events reshaping Europe. Family welcomes you with tearful embraces and endless questions. You answer selectively, sharing sanitized versions of your service while omitting the more disturbing realities of campaign and battle. What could you possibly say about Marengo that wouldn't either trivialize its horror or traumatize these civilian listeners? After 2 weeks that feel simultaneously too long and too short, you return to Toulon with mixed emotions, relief at resuming the structured clarity of military life, guilt at that very relief. Home is no longer simply home, it's become a place you visit rather than fully inhabit. Marcel welcomes you back with characteristic understatement, a nod, a brief clasp of shoulders, a cup of wine, already poured at your usual café table. Neither of you mentions the leave directly, but his quiet company communicates understanding of your conflicted feelings. Spring advances into summer, bringing baking Mediterranean heat to Toulon. Your duties remain light by campaign standards. Garrison routines, occasional naval support operations, public ceremonies maintaining the army's visible presence in this strategic port. News continues flowing from Paris, where Napoleon's regime increasingly resembles traditional monarchy despite maintaining republican terminology. New aristocratic titles are created, elaborate court protocols established, government positions distributed to Bonaparte's relatives and supporters. Calling himself first consul while acting like a king, comments a lieutenant during an off-duty gathering. How long before he takes the final step? The answer comes in May 1804, when Napoleon Bonaparte officially transforms the French Republic into the French Empire, with himself as Emperor of the French. The coronation ceremony in December, where he famously takes the crown from Pope Pius VII's hands to place it on his own head, merely formalizes a reality that has been developing since his post-Marengo political consolidation. By this time, your regiment has been transferred again, first to Italy, then to the expanding camp complex at Bologna, where the peace with Britain has collapsed and invasion preparations have resumed with renewed intensity. The military machine that Bonaparte has built continues operating with methodical efficiency, moving units like chess pieces across the European board according to his strategic vision. And what of Marengo itself, that pivotal battle that snatched victory from defeat and cemented Napoleon's political position? As years pass, its historical significance becomes increasingly clear while its messy reality fades from public memory. The battle enters legend, immortalized in paintings, histories, and popular accounts that gradually smooth its rough edges. The near defeat becomes a masterful plan. The desperate afternoon counterattack transforms into brilliant tactical foresight. The contingent factors that might have produced disaster are minimized or forgotten entirely. Funny how it changes in the telling, Marcel observes, when you both encounter a particularly romanticized account published in 1805. Reading this, you'd think Bonaparte planned the whole thing exactly as it happened. Retreat, counterattack, victory. Didn't feel planned from where we were standing, you reply, remembering the genuine terror of that chaotic retreat. The certainty of defeat before Desai's arrival changed everything. Marcel nods. Never does. But history needs heroes and clean narratives. Messiness doesn't fit the monuments. The observation captures something essential about Napoleon's relationship with history, his acute awareness of legacy, his active participation in shaping how events would be remembered. Even as Marengo was happening, he was already considering how it would be recorded and interpreted. Years continue passing, carrying both of you through Napoleon's expanding empire. You serve in campaigns from Spain to Austria, witnessing the apex of Bonaparte's power and the beginning of its decline. Marcel, aging but still remarkably resilient, remains your constant companion through victory and hardship alike. Occasionally, during rare, peaceful interludes, you both reminisce about Marengo, not the mythologized version celebrated in imperial propaganda, but the authentic experience you shared, the desperate hours of retreat, the miraculous reversal, the narrow margin between destruction and glory that shaped Napoleon's trajectory and, by extension, your own lives. Sometimes I think about how close it was, you confess, during one such conversation, somewhere in the German forests during the 1809 campaign. If Desai had arrived an hour later, or Kellerman hadn't charged at exactly the right moment, everything would be different, Marcel finishes. Bonaparte might have fallen from power, Austria might still control northern Italy, England might have built another coalition immediately rather than signing peace at Amiens. And us? He shrugs. Dead, maybe, or serving some different master, or back home ploughing fields as if we'd never marched to Italy. The conversation highlights history's contingency, how pivotal moments balance on knife edges, how seemingly minor factors can redirect the course of nations and individual lives alike. Marengo might easily have been Bonaparte's last battle rather than his regime-defining victory, relegating him to a footnote rather than a central figure in European history. More years pass. Napoleon's empire reaches its zenith, then begins its gradual decline. The disastrous 1812 Russian campaign, the War of Liberation in Germany, the desperate defense of France itself as Allied armies close in from all directions. Through it all, you and Marcel somehow survive. older, wearier, increasingly conscious of having witnessed something extraordinary, something historians will study for centuries. When the end finally comes, Napoleon's first abdication in 1814, his brief return during the 100 Days, the final defeat at Waterloo in 1815, it carries a sense of tragic inevitability, the extraordinary energy that propelled Bonaparte from obscurity to mastery of Europe has finally exhausted itself against the combined resources of his enemies. In the aftermath, as the Bourbon monarchy returns and France contracts to its pre-revolutionary borders, veterans of the Napoleonic Wars find themselves in an uncomfortable position, living symbols of a regime now officially condemned, their sacrifices and victories suddenly recast as misguided participation in an illegitimate enterprise. Some, like Marshal Ney, pay with their lives for loyalty to Napoleon. Others make pragmatic accommodations with the restored monarchy. Most common soldiers simply return to civilian life, carrying their memories and experiences into a France eager to forget revolutionary and imperial excesses. For you and Marcel, now in your 40s and bearing the physical marks of 2 decades of warfare, the transition proves challenging but not impossible. The practical skills developed through military service, discipline, adaptability, technical knowledge, find application in civilian contexts. The bonds formed with fellow veterans provide networks of mutual support and understanding in a society that increasingly views the Napoleonic era with ambivalence. We lived through something that'll never happen again, Marcel reflects as you both observe the removal of imperial eagles from a public building in 1816, a revolution that became an empire, a continent at war for 20 years, one man's vision reshaping nations. Worth it? You ask, the question containing all the complexity of your shared experiences, the glory and suffering, achievement and waste, moments of transcendent purpose and periods of meaningless hardship. Marcel considers before answering, his once black hair now liberally streaked with grey, his weathered face mapped with lines that trace 2 decades of campaigns across Europe. Parts of it, he finally says. Not all, but parts. It's the most honest assessment possible, acknowledging both the legitimate accomplishments of the Napoleonic era and its terrible costs, the genuine idealism and the destructive ambition, the opportunity for common men to rise based on merit and the millions of lives expended in pursuit of Bonaparte's vision. As France gradually stabilises under restored monarchy, then constitutional monarchy, then republic again, the Napoleonic legacy evolves from immediate controversy to historical perspective. Time smooths sharp edges, contextualises achievements and failures, separates the man from the myth. And Marengo, that pivotal battle where everything nearly ended before it properly began, retains its significance as the moment when Napoleon Bonaparte truly consolidated his grip on France's destiny, the victory that might easily have been defeat, the desperate afternoon when the future balanced on choices made by exhausted men in smoke-filled chaos. You and Marcel, among the dwindling number who actually witnessed those events, gradually transition from participants to custodians of memory, telling younger generations not the sanitized official version, but the messy, contradictory reality of what actually happened on those Italian plains in June 1800. The truth is always more interesting than the legend, Marcel insists whenever someone seeks first-hand accounts, and the truth of Marengo is that greatness and disaster were separated by minutes, by coincidence, by luck as much as genius. It's a perspective that honours both Napoleon's undeniable abilities and the role of chance in human affairs, the unpredictable factors that can elevate or destroy even the most carefully laid plans, the narrow margins that often separate triumph from catastrophe. As you both age into your final years, the Napoleonic era gradually transforms from lived experience to history. The battles you fought become chapters in textbooks, the hardships you endured footnotes in scholarly accounts, the small human moments largely forgotten in grand narratives of political and military developments. But for you and Marcel, until the end, Marengo remains vivid and immediate, not the mythologized version celebrated in imperial propaganda, but the authentic experience of ordinary men caught in extraordinary circumstances, the desperate retreat, the miraculous reversal, the narrow escape from disaster that changed the course of European history. And in quiet moments, as sleep approaches on beds far more comfortable than campaign bedrolls, yet somehow reminiscent of those distant bivouacs, you sometimes return to those Italian fields in memory, not to the horror and chaos of battle itself, but to the evening after victory. Gathered around campfires, sharing simple food and wine, processing their miraculous survival through conversation and companionable silence. In that peaceful space between wakefulness and dreams, history's grand narratives dissolve into human-scale experiences, individual courage and fear, friendship and loss, the strange privilege of witnessing pivotal events that will echo through generations. And perhaps that's the truest legacy of Marengo and the Napoleonic era, not the territories conquered or political systems established, but the profound reminder that history happens to real people in real places, that its grandest movements consist ultimately of individual choices and actions, that its seemingly inevitable developments often balance on knife edges of chance and circumstance. As consciousness fades towards sleep, you carry that understanding with you, a perspective hard-won through experience, a wisdom that contextualizes both Napoleon's extraordinary achievements and their ultimate impermanence against the broader flow of human events. Tomorrow will bring new challenges in a world continuously evolving beyond the Napoleonic moment. But tonight, in the gentle transition to dreams, there remains the quiet satisfaction of having witnessed history's turning point, having played some small role in events that scholars will study for centuries to come, having truly understood the narrow margin between defeat and victory that shaped an era, and in that peaceful knowledge you rest.